Good morning. This is lecture 3 for the Interpreting in Superior Courts Felony course. By now you should know the material from lecture 1 and lecture 2. Material from lecture 1 is still misdemeanor material. We briefly talk about it in the first lecture. And the material from lecture 2 is actually the guilty plea in superior courts. Which is quite similar to the forms that you have studied in your misdemeanor course. This week, the assignment from your class manual is material for lecture number 3. And that material basically deals with a typical plea in felony court. So you're going to find that to be a very, very easy and accessible material. In fact, you know all of that. You should know all of that, I should say, because that material is similar to what we have been doing in the pleas in misdemeanor court, plus the one that we started working on last week. Those 4 or 5 pleas that I gave you the link to access. You may or may not remember that. Let me just write it for you here. I need to figure out where this is. Give me 1 second, please. So I'll give you the site shortly. Let's see, what would be this one? Give me 1 second until I find my board here that I cannot find. Well, anyway, I'll give you the site later on. I'll type on the board and I'll give you the site. But I did that already last week. It was one that ended with certifiedplea.pdf. Basically, it was interpreting.com/certified plea PLEA.pdf. Okay, so those are the ones. That's the site that we were doing last week. So the site of the material that we were doing last week. So basically what we have is we have completed most of the key elements for interpreting in felony courts. So we have the elements for misdemeanor as well as the elements for felony. There are a couple of things that we want to discuss today. Number one, I don't know if we have any students in Arizona, but in Arizona they are looking for an interpreter in the courts, and if interested, please let me know in the question where you ask the question. If you're interested, I'll show that to you, so that you can see what the openings are and so on and so forth. I believe it is in Tucson, Arizona. So I'm not sure if we have students there. I know we do have students from that area in the Wednesday class. So now that I have let me just write now that I have the tablet. Thank you. So the site is www.interpreting. This is the site for the material that we have done last week. You may or may not remember, but this is all the different pleas that we did. So that will be the site to be able to access that material. So as I was saying, we just have done most of the things that are required of you to work in misdemeanor and felony court. The only thing that needs to be done, and this is done in lecture number 3, is put it all together. So today we're going to assume that you are hired to work in a courthouse that deals with misdemeanors and felonies. And we're going to make you work during these two and a half hours or so. So we're going to look at, I'm going to discuss how usually, depending on which district or county you work, but how it happens. So we're going to assume that you're coming in the morning to work in the courthouse as an interpreter, and that courthouse has both misdemeanor, felonies, juvenile, and also has well, we know that misdemeanor and felonies. Felonies includes juvenile and family law. So we're going to look at the protocol, what you need to do as an interpreter, and then we're going to be doing practices that illustrates what you will be doing on a regular basis when you work in the courts. These practices are nothing new. I mean, there might be some that are a little bit different, but in general is what we have been studying so far. So there isn't any surprise in terms of the practice. What you will find, however, is that while you're working in this courthouse this morning, you will be assigned to different type of judges, and different judges have different speeds. And the speed at which we are going to be dealing with, in some cases, might be a little bit too complicated, too difficult for you, and that's an illustration of what you need to work on. And usually speed is actually accomplished by extensive practice. There is no solution for it. I can't give you a magic solution for that. You do need to know your vocabulary first, and then do the practice on a continuous basis over and over and over again. Keep in mind that we have one more lecture, which is lecture number 4, and once we finish with it, you are technically trained to go and work in the courts already. The remaining 3 classes is just for the preparation for the state exam, which will have many of the material. You will need to know what we have learned so far for the state exam, but the remaining 3 classes deals mainly with the sight translation component that in the state exam is unrealistic because they ask you for sight readings that are not necessarily what we do in court. And then those are the next 2 courses. And then the last course is the preparation, where we are actually learning how to it's kind of an exam strategy based on the material that we have learned. And we will also be looking at how to score the maximum points in the exam, how the exam is graded, what is the approach to score the highest grade possible in each of the components. We will look in the last course, we will get into some family law matters, some unlawful detainers, probate, conservatorship, guardianship, so material that is mainly civil, just in case the exam decides to include a sight translation in that area. And basically, that's basically when you're really ready to take the exam. But this course, when you finish this course, you could go to court anywhere, and you will be able that you are in control of what's going on. And by that I mean that you are going to be, you're going to be doing or supposed to be doing a good job. The only problem that you're going to have is the speed. It's not that you're going to go into a courtroom and you're going to hear a proceeding now and you will not understand most of the things that are going on. And as a matter of fact, quite the opposite will occur. You will, without any doubt, understand everything. The only problem is the speed. There will be occasional terms and legal jargon that may come in that might be a little bit difficult to deal with because you don't have that experience of working every day in the courts. So that's what we are trying to do today, trying to get you that experience in one session, which is lecture number 3. And this session basically makes you work as an interpreter. That's what we're going to be doing today. Now, the first thing you need to keep in mind is that when you are working as an interpreter, you are going to be working either as an independent contractor. In many states, that will be the case. Even here in California, you can also have that classification, or you can be considered to be an employee. And that is only here in California for some people that want to be employees and therefore dedicate all their time working for the court system. Regardless, usually what happens when you go to a courthouse that has both misdemeanor and felonies is that you will be assigned to the interpreter's office. Or interpreter's lounge, we call it. There is a lounge where all the interpreters kind of meet in the morning, and they're usually, here in LA, there could be about 20, 25 interpreters in that lounge, and particularly in the main building here in Criminal Courts building. San Bernardino may have 10, 15. Different locations may have different number of interpreters. And there are some desks there, not necessarily your desk, but you will sit down. And the way it works is that early in the morning, the calls will come in, and we'll give you the assignment. The assignment for the very first part of the morning doesn't necessarily mean that it is for the whole morning, although it could be, or it might be only to go to a department and just interpret a plea and then have to come back to the office. So the process is, from the office, you get the calls, and then you go to whatever department you're assigned to go, and you interpret there. When you finish, you come back to the office, wait for the next call, and that's how it works. Of course, there might be an assignment. They might send you to a department where you're going to be interpreting for a long period of time. It could be a trial, for example, or it could be a preliminary hearing that lasts 2.5 hours. So there is no, you can't really predict how long in fact, when you receive the call, you don't even know what it is, what you're there for. It could be a trial, it could be anything. And all you're going to say is, we need you in Department H or Department 127. So you will then take the elevators, go to that floor. You need to make sure that wherever you work, particularly when you work in big courthouses, those that handle misdemeanors and felonies, and those are usually the courthouses that have the name of the city, right? So Los Angeles County Criminal Courts Building, for example, and San Bernardino Criminal Courts. So in those cases, you do need to have some type of map and know exactly which floor these departments are located, because if you don't have that information, you're not going to find it in the courthouse generally, and it's going to take a long time until you find those departments. So one of the things that many counties will provide you when you sign up to work for them is basically a map of that courthouse. So it will tell you what floor and what department. So if you're assigned to Department 112 and that is in the 11th floor, for example, then you will go to the 11th floor and then go to Department 110. As you walk into the department, into the courtroom, you will go through those swing doors that actually divide the area where the court personnel and the attorneys are and the audience. And the first of all, you will walk through it if the court is not in session. If the judge is in session, you will go to the first row in the audience portion and sit down. Try to sit down closer to where the bailiff is going to be, either on the right or on the left. There are usually two rows or two columns, I should say, of seats, right? So they are like this generally, and then so here's in the middle. It goes where you walk, and then you just sit to the area where the bailiff is located in the first row. You will have your badge, and you usually don't go through these swing doors when the court is in session unless the bailiff tells you to do so. So you sit there, and if they need you right away, the clerk will notice that you're there. The bailiff will notice and will invite you to come to that area. If the court is not in session, then you just walk through and go directly to talk to the bailiff. And then you tell the bailiff who you are, you're the interpreter. They may need your name. So you have the ID, so you can show the ID if you want to. And then after that, you just give your name to the court reporter, because the court reporter has to write on the transcript that you were the interpreter for that particular proceeding. You usually, you can ask the clerk, the clerk will tell you, we have a plea, we have this, we have that, we have a preliminary hearing, we have a witness. Whenever they say we have a witness who speaks Spanish, that means you're going to be using the consecutive mode. And that is an indication that you will be there only for that witness or any witness that speaks Spanish in that preliminary hearing or trial. Then you will take a seat. Usually, you introduce yourself to the public defender because the public defender is the one that uses the interpreter the most. And many things can actually occur in that proceeding. The public defender may say, "Yes, I was given we have an offer. I need to go and talk to my client in the cell." In which case, you go with the public defender to the cell. You do like the pre-trial hearing. You remember that from the previous, from the first or the second course. And then after the defendant takes the offer, you know that the attorney is going to ask you to read that form. It could be, if it's a felony, it will be the form that you studied for, in week number 2 in this class. If it is a misdemeanor, it could be any of the forms that you studied in your misdemeanor course. You do that right away. Make sure that the defendant puts the initials. You sign. The defendant signs. You have to keep in mind that you cannot give anything to the defendant when the defendant is in the cell. So you got to give anything, like the form and everything, to the bailiff. And the bailiff will give that to the defendant. Never give the defendant a pen or a pencil, because that's a deadly weapon in county jail. So you will give nothing to the defendant. Okay, just read everything. And then we'll say, "Do you have any questions?" Hopefully they will say no. If they do, you call the attorney and then answer those questions. And once that is done, you sign and everything, and you give it to the bailiff, so the bailiff can give it to this person. This person fills it out, returns. If you have the time, you should be there in the cell, basically making sure that the defendant puts the initials in the right boxes and signs in the right place. And if the defendant is missing something, you make sure the defendant does complete that box. And then once it's done, the defendant will give that form to the bailiff. So you go to the courtroom, you tell the bailiff the defendant has completed the form. The bailiff picks it up, gives it to it goes through the whole process. And then eventually the bailiff brings the defendant out, and then you interpret for the defendant a typical plea. Not everything in court is a plea. Sometimes you can be called for an assignment where the only thing you're going to be doing is just interpret for the family member of the defendant as to what happened in the defendant's case. And that's usually the bailiff explains to them, and they need your help. It could be as simple as that. Or it could be as complicated as interpreting for a witness, as we mentioned before, or it could be that you're asked to interpret in a preliminary hearing for the defendant. That's usually not that common, because most of the courtrooms have already an interpreter assigned. And those people that go to the office, the lounge, that are waiting for these calls are what we call floaters. And those are people that are the newcomers, people that just started working. And they kind of fill in whenever, one interpreter gets sick, then they fill in, or when sometimes they need 2 interpreters in the same department, because there is a need for an interpreter to interpret for the defendant, and then there is a need for another interpreter to interpret for the witness. So those are the typical type of things. In general, most of the cases is going to be a plea, something similar to that certified plea, if it is in felony court, or any other plea that we will be doing some of those today. But besides that, you could also have a probation violation hearing. And a probation violation hearing is very quick. But it's a hearing where the defendant is kind of charged with a violation of his probation in another case. And it's very simple, because usually the defendants admit to that violation, and the judge then basically pronounces judgment there. And usually the judge may give a little bit more time in jail, or may ask the defendant to start from scratch that probationary period. There is a punishment associated with that. And some judges don't care that much, and they don't punish the defendant that much. So it's completely up to the discretion of the court. So the other thing is that you need to be aware that um, most of these cases that you will be doing are very quick. And by that I mean that these are cases where they don't last more than 10 minutes. So the question is, what happens when you finish? So the first thing you do is you ask the clerk if they need you for any other case before you leave that department, because you really don't know whether they call you for one case or more than one case. So you'll go to the clerk, and if it's a female clerk, you say, Madam Clerk, do you need me for anything else? The clerk will say, no, thank you very much. And then you go back to the office and wait for the call. In some offices, how do they handle these calls? Well, you may go back to the office maybe at 9:15, let's say, once you finish your case, and you realize that out of the 25 people that were in the office, now there are only 2 or 3, because many of those 25 are the ones that are assigned to the departments on a daily basis, which you eventually may be assigned as well. And that's something, if the judge likes you a lot, then the judge may ask the office to have you in that courtroom. And, there is a process that takes place, but it's not going to happen at the very beginning, at least for the first 6 months to a year. Usually the counties want you to be floating so that you go to different cases at the beginning. So then you go back to your office and you just wait. And there are only 3, whoever got there first will get the first call, second and third. So sometimes they have a board where they write the name of the interpreter and where the interpreter is located, what department, and then they can see who is coming next, right? So they have a list of the interpreters that are floaters, and they can see who is supposed to be taking the next call, and so on and so forth. So the assumption for this process to work well is, the assumption is that when you finish interpreting in the morning in a courtroom, let's say you started at 8:30, it's 9:15, you're done, that you go back to the office instead of going to have a coffee and spend half an hour somewhere. Because when you do that, you're actually making other interpreters work harder, right? Because they have to go to more departments, and it's not a really good professional thing to do. Besides, it's not allowed. In some courthouses, it depends on the jurisdiction, but you might see that they have what we call supervisors, and they are just, you don't even know the supervisor, but they are walking but they know you. So they are walking because you have the ID, right? So they are walking to see whether you are taking breaks and this and that. So there could be some ramifications to that type of behavior. We had, in many instances, this is going to happen all the time. Some people actually want to have a coffee and it takes longer than what it should take. You can easily buy your coffee and go to the office and have the coffee in your office. But they prefer to go there, then they go outside and they come back, and suddenly they finish at 9:15 and they get to the office at 10:30. Some of them, some interpreters will go to any courthouse and sit in and wait there instead of being in the office. It's kind of silly to do all this, because what you really want to do is get as much practice as possible. And that's kind of the process that you will be facing in most jurisdictions. It should be noted also that there might be some paperwork that needs to be filled in by the clerk, and that's something they will tell you when you get hired. They will tell you as to the administrative procedures, and sometimes the clerk has to sign that you were there. That's a possibility. So these things are actually things that you will be, I guess, trained once you get hired. And I can't really discuss those because that does change from one jurisdiction to the other. So in terms of what we're going to be doing next is I'm going to be sending you. So imagine now that you're at your home, but you are now going to receive a call and you're going to be going to a particular department. So what I will do is when the tape is over, the assumption is that you're already back in the office. And what I mean by over is when you actually see me. If you still see that says simultaneous, it means that you have more than one case in that particular courtroom. And then when you see me, I will tell you, okay, now you're back in the office. So now I'm going to send you, you receive a phone call. I'm going to send you to this other department. The other thing I wanted to tell you is that it's always beneficial to be able to look at the court calendar if you're going to be there for the whole morning. If you're there just for one case, it's okay to look at the calendar. They're going to let you know. You're not going to be able to take the calendar with you. Usually, it is they have it on top of the clerk's desk, so you can just look at it. And when you look at it, you will see what case you have to interpret, and you will have a case number. In some jurisdictions, they will ask you to write the case number, and then you have to sign and this and that. Or not you, but rather the clerk has to sign. And it's always a good idea to keep track of those case numbers, for your personal use. For example, you can write down the case number, the name of the defendant, the department that you interpreted in, the location of the courthouse, and the date. And the reason being that to renew your license, you have to show that you have done 40 assignments in 2 years. At least in California, that's a requirement. And when you fill out the paperwork to renew, now they don't do that anymore, but you got to keep track of those 40 cases. Right now, you just basically sign under penalty of perjury that you did 40 cases. But you got to keep track in case they come back and they want to audit you. So you got to have, you have to have 40 cases justified, or, the list and the names and all that stuff every 2 years during the renewal period, at least 40 cases. That is here in California, because the renewal process requires to state under penalty of perjury that you actually completed 40 cases, and that you also completed the continuing education units. And those continuing education units, you can get them by going to a conference or taking a class or whatever. It has to be approved by the Judicial Council. But that's one way to do it. And usually they issue a letter indicating that you attended that, so you keep that handy as well. Nobody, in so many years, I haven't actually received any requests for that. Neither do I know anybody who has received a request, but it is possible that they do this, on random basis. So it doesn't matter whether they do it or not. It's your responsibility to keep track of those. Okay. All right. So before we begin, let me answer the question. What's the final test for this class? It's just like any other test. There is a written exam that covers lectures 1, 2, 3, and 4 in your manual. And then there's going to be an oral examination. And the oral exam can be anything. I'll basically pretend that you are going to a department like now, and then I'll give you the exam. It's about 15 minutes. It's kind of long, but it's about 15 minutes, and it is an oral test. And next week you're going to be able to get the schedule, schedule your final examination. I can tell you right now that it will take place 2 weeks from today. And it will be on Saturday. So all Saturday, I will be testing people. I know that some people are unable to take the test. This creates a lot of problems for everybody, including myself, because I have a slot to do the final examination. So just pick as soon as you are given the opportunity to schedule your test next week, just click on it and just pick a time that it is within this time period from 8 to 11. If you don't watch this live next week, then you will come later and there might not be anything available. Then, you got to make sure that you do schedule it during this period of time. I don't mind when you schedule it. You can schedule at 4 p.m. on Saturday. But if you are unable to do that at that time, then that complicates matters, because now you say, well, I can do it at 4 o'clock. I can do it from 8 to 11, but I didn't attend live, so I didn't schedule it on time. So now I cannot do it. I have to do it on the week. And sometimes I can't do it on a week because I have to turn in the grades. The classes start, I believe, the following week. So the best thing is just to take that exam on that date. So plan on taking the final examinations 2 weeks from today, from 8 to 11. And there will be sufficient, there should be sufficient. I may start a little bit earlier, like 7:30, so that I can fit everybody that is in this class. I can fit them from 8 by 11 o'clock. Next question. What is the process to renew your license? Very simple. You just pay money and you show that you have completed 40 hours, 40 assignments in 2-year period, and that you completed a certain number of continuing education units. For the first period that you renew your license after you pass the exam, you also have to show that you have completed their ethics workshop, which is required. You won't be able to work without it. And that's usually online, offered by the Judicial Council. And then pay a fee, $100. Every year you have to pay $100. But you don't have to retake a test unless you don't comply with these requirements. I think you answered my question. Okay, yes. Will the oral test be that what's on the class manual, or be a little different? It's whatever we have been doing in the practices in class. Okay, so the practice in class are critical for the final exam. Is there going to be a class next Saturday during Memorial Day weekend? Yeah, I'll teach the class next Saturday. I didn't even know that was Memorial Day weekend. I teach the class as regularly. So if you are, if you're planning to go out, then you might want to perhaps, watch it later on. Be aware that the schedule for you to sign up to the option for you to schedule your final exam will be available. I don't think it's available yet. Let me take a look at it. I doubt it. There is anything available. No, there's nothing. But it will be available the Friday before. So this coming Friday, if you cannot make it on Saturday, then you can go on Friday, maybe even Thursday night, and just access the site and schedule your exam already. That way you can schedule it from 8 to 11. So yeah, we do have class. Yes. No doubt about that. Okay, so having said that, what we are going to do is we're going to start with our first assignment. So now you're in the office, you receive a call, and they'll tell you to go to Department 117. So you go to Department 117, which is located on the 11th floor. You walk in, you do everything that we discussed, and then you are asked and the proceeding is called. So we're going to do the proceedings. We don't have to go through this whole process in each time you're assigned to a new department. So the material that I played today is going to be important for your final examination, because this is basically what you will be doing in court. And I tend to, I always try to give you an exam that it is related to what you will be doing in court. Okay, so having said that, so you walk in, you do all that, and now here we're going to do the practices, okay? Or basically the assignments. Until I come back, at which time I will tell you which other department you go, and then how this is going to work. It's going to be working like that on a continuous basis. Having said that, it's going to start now.